first of many H2F educational videos. Today we're going to be discussing basic nutrition with Captain Jeremy Mullins. He's going to be our team's registered dietitian. Every 2 weeks we're going to be doing a new topic. Those will be listed in advance. And without further ado, we have Captain Mullins.
Thank you, sir. For situational awareness, we are live, I think, on Facebook or Instagram. We are filming this for later consumption, and then we also have live attendees. So I'll try to stay within the frame for those that are live, and then we can also pull questions off that, okay? So as Lieutenant Masco said, I am Captain Jeremy Mullins. I'm a registered dietitian by trade, also a strength coach, but with today's lecture, it is going to be primarily nutrition domain from that standpoint, okay? So if we look at, yes, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint, but we do have PowerPoint for you to kind of to look at and to reference, okay? And unfortunately, when we look at nutrition, this is a great time of the year to talk about it because everyone wants to do New Year's resolutions, and diet is a big term at this point. But one thing I want to do is redefine the term diet, okay? And what's cool is, you know, I was explaining this to my kids, okay, and I'll kind of joke with this. I have two older kids, and we just had a brand new one. What is today, the 5th? So she's like 15 days old now. And we were trying to explain to the older kids that, like, technically the baby's on a diet. She's, you know, all she can consume is breast milk. That's her diet, okay? So when you think of the term diet, we want you to think the foods that you consume versus being on a diet. And that's where sometimes that negative connotation comes into diets, because as adults, maybe we've been on a diet before, and diets generally remove things, right, from that. There's all these restrictions that go into it. So we always want to look at, you know, the diet is a nutrition program, and it's what we consume on a daily basis, okay? My role today and my goal is to just teach nutrition and then let you choose a lifestyle as far as diet goes that works for you. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's sometimes that mistakes that dietitians, nutritionists, personal trainers make is they put these blinders on and they say, okay, this is the way you have to do it. And that's not the case, okay? Because you, I can see who's in the room right now, don't know who's live, but I can tell you the diet that worked in your 20s might not work in your 30s. What worked in your 30s might not work in your 40s, okay? If we start training a different way, if, you know, we take a desk job versus a job that we were up moving around more, there's all these things that go into play. My ladies over here, like, he's taking notes, he knows, right? So keep that in mind as we go through. It is a lot of process, but we're not here to be like, this is the way to do it. We're here to educate and then let you make better decisions as you move forward, okay? So the first slide we have up here is, okay, what is the best nutrition approach? What do you guys think? So those that are here, what is the best approach? Or let me rephrase that. Let's get away from best. What are the hot topics or talked about approaches right now that's out there? Keto diet, right? What's the other one that's kind of in fasting? Okay, I would argue that right now in the quote social media world or the internet world, that's what a lot of people are asking about: keto and fasting. Keto is kind of losing steam. I think it was a popular 5 years ago a lot, and it's slowly losing steam, I think. But fasting is probably the biggest one that I hear. Okay, and what I like to do with those is, all right, let's teach definitions. Everyone in the room, everyone watching online, fast. We all fast, okay? Because fasting is just the consumption of food or your last consumption of food at night until you break the fast the next day with what? Breakfast, right? So break the fast. So we all fast, okay? Can fasting work? Yes, because it can help you control your consumption, right? If you are, tend to eat a lot of food when you do eat, if you eat smaller amount of window or time, then yes, it can help, but there's no magic to it, okay? Same thing with keto. I've seen people do keto and do really well. I've seen people do keto and gain weight because you still got to watch your consumptions of the fat, right? Because fat's a fuel, okay? Here is a big picture, okay? It's not what's going on in this room. It's not what's going on in line. This is what is going on in what I can attest to in 20 years of practice. This is what we see, okay? So what is the best approach? Right now, the American diet, 75% of, when we say Western, think of Western civilization, 75% of the diet is made up of processed foods. So that means fast food, that means things that come in packages, that type of stuff. 3/4 of the average person's calories is coming from processed foods. Okay? So only 25% of that you can think about is coming from fresh fruits, veggies, lean meats, nuts, seeds, that type of stuff. 75% processed foods. We have had a decrease in fruits and veggies over the last 3 decades. Right? So we talk about fruits and veggies inside of diets. We've seen that consumption of that has slowly came down. And then, just a couple things that are related to us, here in the Army. We look at 18 to 20% of the Army is obese. And then the percentage of eligible recruits to exceed the military's body fat standards has doubled for men and tripled for women since 1960. So you can kind of see the trends of not only outside in the civilian world, but also what we're dealing with here as far as recruiting and then just, obesity within the force. Okay? So where do we get, quote, nutrition knowledge from? Where do most people, okay, and you can poke fun with this, okay, but where do most people get their nutrition knowledge?
Social media influencers.
Social media, right? But we got people on social media today, which is a good thing, right? But yeah, social media, what do you guys say, Google? Yeah, the internet, right? And unfortunately, yes, you talked about social media influencers. A lot of times, these diets are out there to sell, okay? And I bet all of you guys in the past week, 2 weeks, have seen the magic diet pills, the wraps, the programs that say you don't have to diet, all that, quote, fancy stuff, right? Because it sells, okay? Versus me saying, hey, I'm going to have to teach you, what foods are good, and we're going to have to make good choices and actually sacrifice and not have, the pizza and the brownie. You're going to have one or the other. Like, that's hard, okay? But when we sit here and look at, where education comes from, a dietitian has a 4-year degree, plus we have to set for a year internship, which we don't get paid for. Sorry, it still hurts me to say that. That's been 20 years ago. But we have to do a year internship of no pay, and then we have to set for our boards. Okay, so that's a registered dietitian. Medical doctor gets about 2.8 hours. So if you go in to see your physician, not all of them, but a lot of them have only had 1 course in nutrition. And unfortunately, sometimes that knowledge you'll get from them is eat less and move what? More. That is the statement that they'll give you. Okay, and that just doesn't help, right? Because we as humans want to know the reason why we're making changes, okay? Personal trainers, on average, have 1 chapter or, once again, 3 hours, okay? Now, I can tell you from our team doing continuing education, there are nutrition certifications that are out there. So I'm talking about the basic, quote, personal training certificate there that is 3 hours of education. And then there was a study that was done that looked at the knowledge of nutrition. And that what we found is there's a big gap to that, okay? And as we go through what are certain foods today, I'll kind of show you those gaps, because a lot of times we may look at a food and be like, oh, this is an X source, but that source is not, okay? And I'll just do one example of it, not because I don't want to put everybody on the spot with this, but I'll put a few people. But Chief, a package of almonds, what type of food, when you think of almonds, what do you think about? What type of food is that? Do you think it's like a protein, a carb, or a fat when you look at almonds?
It's a fat.
I believe it's a fat.
It's got a little bit of protein, but I believe it's a fat.
Right. That is the correct answer, right? Most people, though, think that almonds or peanut butter, because peanut butter is really good about this, right? Well, they put on the front of the label, high protein source, right? So peanut butter will list high protein source. Well, there's only 7 grams of protein per serving of peanut butter. 14 grams of what? Fat. So there's a lot of this just disconnect to what are, certain foods inside the diet. Or unfortunately, going back to the term diet and people going on diets, people label things as good or what? Bad. Okay? And all of us could maybe argue the point, like, do we think soda is good or bad? All right? Would soda ever be good?
Yeah, I think a glass or 2, it's not going to hurt you.
Right. So here's the argument, right? You're running a marathon and you need quick sugar and a little caffeine. Then a Coca-Cola at mile 22 of the marathon is now what? Good. Right? But I would also argue, yeah, I could say as a dietitian, hey, we probably do not want soda inside the diet. Why? It's empty calories. It's empty carbohydrates. However, it's input versus output. So if Chief says, hey, Jeremy, I eat really good everywhere. I just, every now and again, I like to have a Coca-Cola with my dinner. I'm not going to be against that, right? Because if it's producing results and you feel good, I don't like to label foods as good or bad as much as most of the time foods and what? Sometime foods. Okay, because if we label them good or bad, I don't know about you guys, but for example, you guys will learn this over me. I like peanut butter, okay? A peanut butter Reese egg. If I'm on a diet and I have a peanut butter Reese egg, I feel bad about that. And since I already had one of them out of the packet, I might as well eat the other what? Other 5, right? I already fell off the diet. Versus if we just look at food, right, as what it is, okay? Yes, Reese Cup is, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of fat. That's all it is at the end of the day. If I only have one of those, it's not going to mess me up. But the mentality of me having one and thinking I've already ruined my diet and then me consuming the other 5 and then not worrying about my diet until the next Monday sets me back, okay? So I see some people nodding and smiling because, hey, we've all done that, okay? All right, so here's what we're going to do. We look at optimal nutrition. Okay, there's 3 things I want us to think about, and we're all at different levels, okay? I progressed through my career in practice for the last 2 decades, and I become, at one point, maybe the mistake that a lot of people make is like, okay, this is the way to do it. This is the diet you need to follow. Even now, I'm a numbers guy, so I can work and tell you how much protein, carbs, and fats, all that stuff you need. However, I recognize we're all at different levels, so it's about behavior change and habit change, okay? I've had people have success, and we've had people have success in our program here. One kid comes to mind that we removed him drinking Gatorade out of his diet. He was a college student, and he was overweight, and someone had told him Gatorade was good, so he was drinking like 6 Gatorades a day.
Sugar Gatorade.
Full, yeah, not the I think it's G2 or Gatorade Zero. Full Gatorades, drinking 6 of them, but he was only working out maybe 3 days a week. So all we changed, we didn't change his workout. He changed, his diet by removing the Gatorade and lost 14 pounds in the 90 days we were tracking him. Okay? So when I say we go through this is the broad, and then we'll get a little bit more a little bit more specific as we go along. So we look at quality, okay? We want to focus on the whole foods over the processed foods. Kind of mentioned that earlier. Standard American diet, unfortunately, 75% of the diet is coming from processed foods. Okay, we know that, right? Home-cooked meal is better than fast food. We kind of know that instinctively, but we're busy, okay? But just knowing we should choose more high-quality foods or high quality in the sense of pure foods over processed, okay? Eat more colorful fruits and veggies. I would argue that a lot of times the trends I see is we eat fruits and veggies, but we tend to eat the same ones over and over. So if you think about your diet and you think about your veggies, like and I like to use my family as examples of this, we are broccoli and carrots. Those are the veggies that we consume most of the time. So we might be hitting our number of, quote, servings that we're supposed to hit, but we're not hitting a variety, all right? So we do want to work that variety in as we move forward, okay? And then balance. Eat the correct amount for activities and goals. And I think this is where a lot of people get mixed up, right? Going back to the social media comment, we see a lot of this. I'll see the young 24-year-old, okay, that trains 2 hours a day saying, well, hey, you guys need 500 grams of carbs a day. Carbs are good. Eat 500 grams of carbs. So for an elite athlete that's 24 years old that trains 2 hours, in a session and does two quote sessions a day, they might need 400 or 500 grams of carbs because they need to fuel that training. Okay? Versus my 50-year-old, okay, that has a desk job and hasn't worked out in maybe 10 years, doesn't need 500 grams of carbs. So we have to look at, okay, what are we training for? What is our lifestyle? And that really dictates the amount that we need, okay? Eat a variety. You see that? I'll keep continuing coming up. And then we want to eat enough to feel satisfied and energized, okay? So today is January 5th. What happens a lot of times January 1st, everybody goes on diets where they cut calories and cut foods. Not only do they cut calories and cut foods, they also increase their what? Exercise. So now we're not eating enough to fuel this additional activity that we're doing. So we do want to make sure that we are consuming enough calories for the type of training that we are doing and not under eating from that aspect, okay? And then the timing, this would be a little bit more advanced. You know, a lot of people get worried about the timing before they, you know, everybody wants to learn how to sprint before they learn how to crawl and walk, right? So timing will come into play, okay? And this timing could be, do I eat before bed, right? Do I, you know, eat first thing in the morning? I've heard that that's good for me. Or do I wait an hour? Like all that stuff the timing will matter, but it's not as important a lot of times, I think, to the quality and the amount of food that we are consuming, okay? So those are kind of, we get into optimal nutrition. All this is true for no matter what lifestyle. So,
Can't we just take those 3 pills to balance nature?
yeah, just take the 3 pills, right? And listen, we as humans want that, right? If I come up here and here's what I try to sell, and this is hard to sell. This is going to be hard. This is going to take time. It's going to take effort. And you're likely not to succeed the first time that you start trying to do this. That probably doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy, right? Because it is hard. And changing lifestyle, especially when we've ate a certain way for 10, 20, 30 years based on our culture, based on our family, all that, it is hard to change, okay? Or you might be individuals listening there that in your 20s and teenage years, you could eat whatever you want to, and it didn't matter. And all of a sudden, you turn 38, 39, 40, and it all catches up, right? So that's where it goes into, like it is hard, okay? Any questions thus far on kind of the opening of, like, there's not a one-size-fits-all. It is about balance. Yes, we know more fruits, more veggies, more lean meats. The quality food does matter. And then once again, there's no good foods versus what? Bad foods. There's foods that we should consume most of the time, and there's foods that we consume every now and again. But we shouldn't beat ourselves up on the every now and again, you know, because then that just sets us back, right? So if we go and say, well, you know, I had, you know, I had a bourbon and French fries and a hamburger, okay? Well, if that's once a week and all the other food that you consumed during the week was veggies and fruits and lean meats and all that, you're still doing good. We're going back to what Chief was saying. Okay, you had a soda one day. Not a big deal, okay? Because at the end of the day, it is just a carbohydrate, okay? Questions thus far? I know it's a lot of the basic stuff, but we'd like to get it out of the way first. We good? You guys didn't miss much. Just getting started. All right. So what we like to teach, okay, and I say we as a team, me from the civilian side, and, you know, give you a little bit of background. I've taught college dietetics or nutrition. I've worked in a private practice, you know, inside or in the civilian world, from anywhere from pro athletes to diabetics to gastric bypass patients, right? So I've worked with this whole range of individuals, okay? You know, from where people are worrying about, you know, 5 pounds on their lifts to being holding world records or making the NFL combine, to my soccer mom who just wants to fit into a size pants smaller. You know, all around the board, right? To my diabetic that reverses type 2 diabetes because they have their blood glucose levels under control, okay? All of those diets or nutrition programs might look a little bit different, but they all boil down to the same nutrition, okay? So this is what we teach, macronutrients, because every food out there is either a protein, carb, or fat, which are macronutrients. So every food is either a protein, a carb, or a fat, or a combination of. So it doesn't matter if you want to go low carb, high carb, eat 4 times a day, eat 1 time a day, eat 6 times a day, stand on your head, pat your belly. It doesn't matter. All foods are macronutrients. So that's what we teach. That way it allows you to go out and find the lifestyle nutrition program that works for you, okay? And macro, the term macro, if you think about it, macro meaning large and micro meaning small. So when you hear micronutrients, those are going to be your vitamins, your minerals, polyphenols, that type of stuff, versus macro means it has calories. So protein provides calories, carbs provide calories, fats provide calories. Anybody know the 4th macronutrient? Alcohol. So alcohol has calories, therefore technically it is a macronutrient, okay? You have to come to the advanced nutrition to learn how to work alcohol in, though. You don't get taught that today. So protein, 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrate, 4 calories per gram. Fat, 9 calories per gram. A little tidbit in history. This is where the low-fat diet became the popular diet in the 1970s. Some researcher was like, well, if fat has double the calories and we just reduce fat in the diet, people will start to lose what? Body fat, right? We'll lose weight because fat has double the calories. The problem with that is, okay, we started teaching, and I say we, the dietetic field started teaching low fat. Well, then when you start teaching low fat, and that's the thing to do, companies that make money off selling food, what do you think they started producing? Low fat. For something that's low fat, what makes it taste good? More sugar in it. Okay, you'll see this today. Next time you go to the store, look at gummy bears. On the on the front of the label of gummy bears, it'll say, always been a fat-free food. Because they're still marketing to the era of what? Fat-free. And depending on your experience, aka what area you grew up, you may have remember the low-fat era where everything was low-fat, low-fat, low-fat. Problem is, once again, for things to be low-fat and taste good, they generally add sugar to it. And if we eat a lot of sugar, unfortunately, that can still be converted over to body fat. And we see this in the data with the rise in prediabetes, insulin resistance, and diabetes. Okay? And some stats from that, we're looking at 1/3 of every adult now is at least insulin resistant or a type 2 diabetic. And that is supposed to, in the next 20, 30 years, go to almost 2/3. I'm sorry, to 1 out of 2. So 50% of our adults are going to have some type of insulin resistance or full-blown diabetes, right? And that is because of two things. Overconsumption of carbohydrate, especially our simple sugars, and the lack of resistance training. Those two things can reverse insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Okay, so going down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but I think it's important to say. Okay, and the next part of this is explaining calories. So calories is just a unit of energy. Okay, I want you to understand that. The term calories is just a unit of energy that is given to macronutrients. Okay, it just means energy. Okay, if you think about it, you hop on the treadmill, the personal trainer wants you to, burn 300 calories on the treadmill. That means you are doing physical work that is burning energy that we are measuring via calories. Okay, if I eat that peanut butter, 2 tablespoons, okay, which I'm still trying to lobby to get them to change the serving size of 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, right? I mean, who eats just 2 tablespoons? Yeah, we need to have a sign for that, petition. That is calories, okay? So that's all calories is. Because when we start talking about macronutrients, you're going to learn, even though protein is calories, the body uses protein different than it does carbs and fats. So when we look at just calories in a diet, that's not the best approach. I would rather you look at how much protein, how much carbs, and how much fat I'm eating, because they have different different roles within the body, okay? But here we have calories, and this is, when I break this down, it is how many calories you burn a day. So the fancy exercise phys book will call this total calorie expenditure. What I like to call it is, okay, how many calories do you burn a day? Because for us to lose weight, if that's your goal, okay, to lose weight, you must be in a calorie deficit. You must consume less calories, okay, than you burn. If I want to gain muscle or gain weight, I need to consume more calories than I burn. And if you want to stay the same weight, it needs to be equilibrium. Okay? It needs to be the same. But that is the first law of thermodynamics, where energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's just used, different ways, right? So if I consume less calories and I burn more, right, then my body will use stored body fat, which is a fuel. Okay, and that's how we lose weight. So we have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. But then the next question is, well, how many calories I burn a day? Okay, so that's what I hope to explain in this next part. The first part is BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. This would be like think of it as a clinical setting. So if you were in the ICU or did nothing but lay in a hospital bed. So this is zero movement. How much energy does it take to keep my body alive? For 60 heartbeats a minute, X amount of breaths a minute, with me not moving. That's your basal metabolic rate. This one's generally not used as much as the next one, which is your resting metabolic rate. And this is like if you sit on the couch, did bare movement, used the restroom, brushed your teeth, that type of stuff. Okay, so resting metabolic rate makes up about 60 to 70% of the total calories you burn on a given day. Okay? Show of hands, who has had their body fat tested or metabolism tested in any way? No? In-body machine does it. Tape test doesn't count. In-body? Anything different than in-body? Okay. Do you guys remember what your RMR happened to be on there by chance? 1789. Okay. And you weigh 180-ish? Okay. So resting metabolic rate, there are multiple formulas that you can use to kind of figure this out. Okay. I always try to keep things as simple as possible. All right. If you take your body weight and put a 0 after it, that is roughly how many calories you burn just being alive. Okay? Just doing bare minimum. If you sat in here and had to listen to me all day long, that's how many calories you'd burn. Okay? Take your body weight and put a 0 after it. If you need to lose a little bit, it might be minus 10% or so. If you're lean, more muscle tissue, you might add 10%. But for most people, that is pretty spot on for your resting metabolic rate. Take a 0 and put it after your body weight. Okay? That's how many calories you burn just existing. Then on top of that, okay, we have the thermic effect of feeding, TEF. It's a fancy, once again, these are kind of pulled from exercise phys books. If I eat chicken and broccoli and rice for dinner, how much energy does it take for my body to break that down? That is what this means. So actually when we consume food, your body has to work to break that down. So you're burning calories a lot of times by eating. And this is where you'll hear sometimes that, 6 meals a day is going to increase your metabolism, okay? If you ate the same food over 6 meals versus over 4 meals, it's the same calorie burn because you're eating the same volume of food, okay? The thing I want you to take away from this is when you eat certain foods have a higher thermic effect. So our body has to work harder to break down 200 calories of broccoli, that's a carb, versus 200 calories from the Pop-Tart. And that's where, going back to slide 1, we talked about quality and real foods. Your body has to burn more calories to break those foods down, okay? And we'll get into a little bit more as we dive into protein, carbs, and fats, which ones have the higher thermic effect. This is about 10%, so not a big deal. If you're, 200-pound individual, then your body might be burning an additional 200 calories a day just from eating, just from breaking down food, okay? The last one, and the one that you have the most control over, and it is the most variable one, is exercise or movement, okay? In the books, there will be this non-exercise thermogenesis, of the term NEAT. This is daily activity, okay? Don't get caught up in some of the science words, okay? And so I like to lump activity into 2 categories: purpose exercise and daily activity. Okay, so just think activity, okay, is lumped into 2 things. Exercise, structure exercise, I'm going to work out, and then what? Daily activity. Now, which one of these do you think you can burn more calories in the course of a week?
Not the working out, but just regular work.
Okay, so daily activity. Ladies, what would be your thought on that? Do you think you can burn more calories in the course of a week in a structured exercise program or daily activities? I like it. You guys agree? Will's turning now? Yes, because for most of us, we are not pro athletes. We are not training 6 hours a day, okay? So we're lucky, right, to get that hour a day that we go exercise. And even if you work out hard or you run as hard as you can in an hour, yes, you can burn a lot of calories, but you can also burn a lot of calories throughout your day by doing purpose walking, standing versus sitting, doing a lot more daily activity. The only problem with that, if you think about it, our world over the last 2 to 3 decades, well, I guess that's 20, 30 years, we've developed things that make it a lot easier for us not to have to do what? Work. Or, yeah, we have vehicles, we have dishwashers, we have washing machines. A lot of things that, 40 years ago someone would have to do manual labor, we don't have to do, okay? So one of the things that we like to promote with this is don't discount the daily activity. Shoot for an hour walking a day. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm going for an hour walk. It can be 10 minutes in the morning. It can be 30 minutes on your lunch break. Then it could be another 20 minutes with the dog in the evening. All of that will add up to you are burning more total calories over the course of the day. And you think about over the week, that can be additional, 4,000, 5,000 calories versus just trying to exercise more. Okay, so just know that, that exercise and activity is the most variable one, but you can do quote unquote more damage by being more active in general than trying to exercise more.
So it's funny you say that because I think we're going, well, I know we're going the opposite direction because something as simple as just going to the groceries. Nobody goes to the grocery store anymore. They just go online, order whatever they're going to order, and they go pick it up.
100%, right? Like you go back, 20 years ago, what was the only food you could get ordered? Pizza, right? Like pizza. That's all you could get ordered. Now, most places you can order what? Anything. You don't have to even go to the grocery store. Let me just have it delivered. Yes. So we are, and listen, we're not saying like some of those things aren't convenient. They're not there, but yeah, just being aware of that, right? Or we take these desk jobs, okay? In my old life, I used to own a CrossFit facility, and I would have people come in and they'd be like, well, Jeremy, I'm not losing weight. I'm like, I'm busting my butt in here for an hour, and I'm like, okay. But you have to commute an hour to work. You sit at a desk for 8 hours. Then you commute an hour to here. And then, you're working out hard for our 20-minute workout, and you're moving for a little bit of that. And then you go home and you're sitting the rest of the day. So 1 hour of hard activity doesn't make up for 12 hours of sitting or non-activity during the day. That is correct, okay? And then you're like, well, Jeremy, I thought this was a nutrition lecture. It is. But what I'm teaching is that daily activity will burn more calories, allowing you to consume more calories. Because my goal is for you to eat food, because food nourishes us. My goal is not to make you cut food out. Okay, that's not the goal because it's not sustainable. All right? And I talk to people all the time. Yes, I'm good at what I do in the sense that I can take anyone over an 8 to 12 week period, and if they follow what I say, get them down to very lean. That's cool, but what's cooler is having the person that loses 100 pounds and maintains it for a decade. And hopefully the rest of their life, okay? Or what's cool is having that person lose 80 pounds that couldn't run 1 mile that 3 years later does an Ironman. That's the cool stuff. And that's where knowledge helps, right? Because, once again, this is what we do as humans. We're on this exercise program. All of a sudden, the boss asks us to stay late. We can't go to the gym. Then we get frustrated because we can't go to the gym. They're like, well, I can't get anything in today. But if we know that hour walk at home with the family, so I don't have to not spend time with my family, I can take them on a walk with me, is beneficial. So that's my goal that I want you guys to know out of that, okay? Sorry, a little winded, but that's a little soapbox for me when it comes to movement. Let me do mine. So 214 pounds as of this morning. That means I burn roughly 2,100 calories just existing. 2,100 calories just being alive, I burn 2,100 calories, okay? Let's just say if I want to lose a little weight. How could I lose weight if I know I burn 2,100 calories a day? How much do you think I should eat? Could go less than that, but what if I ate 2,100? If I just sat there all day, right? But, go ahead, yes, correct, right? So, correct. Yes, ma'am. So 2,100 calories is already in a caloric deficit, right? So I know if I take my dog for a 30-minute walk, I'll just try to do today, right? Take my dog for a 30-minute walk in the morning, okay? Rode the bike for 20 or 25 minutes with Masco, did some, bench press and some pull-ups, walk another 30 minutes this evening, okay? Then my body, because of activity, is going to burn another 600, 800 calories to 1,000 calories. But I only spent 1 hour in the gym. The rest of that will come via movement, okay? So yes, if I eat the 2,100 and then I burn 900 through exercise and activity, I've created that calorie what? Deficit, right? But I also know if I eat 2,100 calories and I have to drive 10 hours and I don't do anything that day other than just a little bit of walking, I'm still in a calorie deficit. That is correct, okay? So 2,100 calories just existing. Then, once again, the exercise for me can vary from, 300 or 400 calories because I have to drive, somewhere to, long for the day, or to maybe 2,000 calories. If I'm able to go mountain bike on the weekend, get strength training in, still walk the dog, then I might burn an extra 2,000 calories because I got to do all that stuff, okay? And then, of course, the thermic effect of food, a couple hundred calories. So just knowing that, because unfortunately, and I'll just point my ladies out for this, unfortunately, in the nutrition world, a lot of times, ladies, everybody wants to put you on a 1,000-calorie diet, 1,200, 1,000 calories. It's kind of like the go-to. Yeah, it'll work for a short period of time, but you can't survive on 1,000 calories long term, right? So just know that these are kind of the amounts that we can eat, okay? Any questions on the macronutrients listed or on calories before we slide into protein? Are you able to see questions on there? Or? Okay.
I've got a couple, but
not for this. Okay. We good?
I have a question, sir.
Yes.
Thermic effect of feeding, does that change depending on what you eat?
It does, right? So the question is, on the thermic effect of feeding, does it change based on what you eat? It does. And I'm going to save that conversation when we start diving into protein, carbs, and fats. Which one of the protein, carbs, and fats burn more, okay? And the example I gave, for that earlier was, for example, vegetables, very high thermic effect compared to Pop-Tarts, candy, that type of stuff. So you think of it, the harder it is to break the food down, the more energy it requires. So the higher thermic effect is going to come from your foods that are a little bit harder to break down. So, and we'll dive into that as we move forward. So, good question. All right, so let's start first with protein. Why do we need protein? What's the number one thing most people say? Build muscle, okay? What if someone doesn't want to build muscle? What do you think they say a lot of times with protein? Why do I need it? Right? Why do I need protein? His body's engine. It builds things, okay? So when we break it down, protein's role, okay, in the body is to build things. Hair. You might need more protein. Skin, nails, lining of your intestinal tract, lining of your stomach. Anything that grows on the body that is a cellular level that grows requires a building block in order to be produced. Immune function, hormones, enzymes, anything the body produces requires, guess what? Protein. Okay? So in our, once again, what we hear is, well, Jeremy, the only person that needs to drink a protein shake is, the people want to build muscle tissue. I don't need all that protein. Okay, well, what's all that protein? And let's really talk about what protein does. Okay, so protein is the building block. When someone comes in a clinical setting, okay, if I have a patient in the clinical setting that has had a burn, what do you think their protein needs do? They go up. Because I have damage to tissue, the skin. That means the body needs to work harder and have more protein, building blocks, to recover the what? The burn. My wife, who was pregnant, who's not pregnant, because we had a baby, when she was pregnant, did her protein needs go up or go down? They went up. She's breastfeeding now. Does protein needs go up or they go down? Right. So anytime we introduce a stressor to the body, that means we need to produce more cellular stuff. The body needs more what? Protein. Okay? And that's very important to think about with protein, okay? And I'll get to the amount in a minute. Because people will say inside of the social media world or online, we as Americans get enough protein. Okay? Well, where that comes from is the American Dietetic Association, okay, recommends 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram. That is to prevent malnutrition. Okay, so the 0.8 grams is what our food labels are based on, is what everything percentage-wise is based on, but that is to prevent what? Malnutrition. It's not to live an optimal life if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, stressed, working out, trying to lose weight. Our protein needs are going to need to go what? Up a little bit. Okay, so I always like to preface that because a lot of times when I talk about protein, right, especially from our team, because yeah, we work out, we lift, so a lot of times people are like, well, I don't need that protein. Yes, you do. Going back to my spectrum, from my bariatric patients, to my soccer moms, to my pro athletes, all of them need an increase in protein off of that baseline of just preventing malnutrition, okay? And we went through these earlier, and they're just listed up there. So what is protein needed for? Hormones, enzymes, immune function, transport chemicals, metabolism. It's good for weight management. Going back to Hayden's question, protein has the highest thermic effect. So when you eat 100 calories worth of protein, your body has to burn 30 calories to break it down. So increasing protein in a diet actually helps us burn more calories. So that's another benefit I have to a touch higher, protein. And then also satiety. So when you eat more protein, you feel what? Full. There's really good research right now if we attack or we front load the day with protein, so AKA have a higher protein breakfast, that hunger levels for the day go what? Down. Okay? And once again, the term breakfast, I'm not one of the dietitians that sit and say, well, you have to eat breakfast within the first hour getting up. If you're not hungry and you want to wait 2 or 3 hours before you eat breakfast, I'm okay with that. But I would like to see it a high protein breakfast. Okay? So just some things and caveats that come from that. The next slide goes into requirements. Okay, so once again, when we look at the American Dietetic Association recommends the 0.8. I've also put some stats up here, so it's not just, well, this is what Jeremy was teaching us. This is what's coming from the governing body and some guidance. Daily protein requirements to support muscle growth, recovery, repair for military service members range from 0.8 to 1.6 or 1.4 to 1.7. Okay, and that once again is the low end of prevent malnutrition to the high end, let's recover from our training. Okay? Now, I get it. We're not research people, so all this point, whatever per kilogram, I'll break it down and make it a little bit easier here in a second. Okay? There's also some data out there up to 2 grams of protein per kilogram. Okay? So when we're in a negative calorie balance, aka we're trying to lose weight, when we're trying to gain muscle tissue strength or performance, the data will say we need to eat up to 2 grams of protein per kilogram. So once again, those increases, okay? Could go back to the analogy I was using with my wife, pregnant, breastfeeding, anything like that, then you would need to increase, okay? And then going down to, okay, what is our mission? Are we in an extreme environment? Do we need extra protein, okay? Now, a lot of the professional organizations, International Sports Nutrition Society, does a lot of research on protein intake. We'll recommend 2 to 3 grams or 2 to 3 times higher than the recommended dietary intake. So my point to all that is, A, we need a little bit more protein than what is recommended from just the American Dietetic Association, okay? We like to make it easy and say around 1 gram of protein per target body weight, okay? We're just trying to keep it as easy as possible. Around, okay, which means you could be a little bit short or you can be a little bit over, okay? So we take our target body weight. We want to eat that amount roughly in protein, give or take. Everybody got that? Doing some math on it? Okay? So yeah, I would like to lose 10 pounds and weigh around 200 versus 214. So I eat roughly 200 grams of protein a day. Sometimes that's 180, sometimes that's 220, but that is where I kind of shoot for the amount of protein for me to recover, feel good, and have that optimal health. Question?
Are all proteins the same? So if you are a person who can't do a lot of animal protein, because maybe you have a kidney condition, are vegetable proteins or other proteins from other sources just as good as animal protein?
So question is there a difference in protein quality? Right? And I'll leave out any medical conditions, right? Because that's more of a lane, right? Because I always say this, even as a practitioner, as a dietitian, if there's a medical condition, my answer to that is, what did our medical doctor say, right? So that always defer to, okay, then when I work with clients from that end, if the medical doctor says X, my role is to hold the person accountable to X, okay? But there is a difference in the quality of proteins, okay? So our animal sources are generally going to have higher quality amino acid profiles, okay? So our amino acids are just the building blocks that make up the proteins, okay? We have, so there. We have complete proteins mean we have all the amino acids. We have all the building blocks we need to build these structures that we were talking about. Plant protein has incomplete amino acids, okay? Doesn't mean it's not good quality. And this is why we mix plant-based, right? So you think about it, it's the reason rice and beans is a great combination. Because if you eat rice and beans, then you're getting the complete amino acid profile that comes from that, okay? Collagen, for example, is another incomplete protein, but a little bit of collagen is great for hair, skin, and nails because that is a specific amino acid that allows recovery from that, okay? So the quality does matter, and what I always say is the triage is, hey, get the amount you need in first, then we can start looking on that quality, okay? And I don't have when I teach, it's like the preference is up to you as an individual, okay? And we look at protein sources, and it's kind of on here, right? So most of our protein sources are beef, chicken, turkey, ham, pork, fish, eggs, powder protein, and this is where we can get in some of the plant-based. With the soy, you also have pea protein you can do, which are going underneath the plant sources, whey, casein, so there's some different options there, right? Most of the time when I'm saying these are our sources, they're our primary sources. Like beans has protein, but beans is a carbohydrate source, what? First. And that's where a lot of that, like just education is different. When I taught college, I had to stand behind the podium and say, beans is a protein substitute, because that's what it was labeled. But if you look at what beans is from a macronutrient breakdown, it's 30 to 40 grams of carbs, depending on the type of bean, with 10 to 14 grams of protein. So beans is a what source first? Carb that has some protein. Okay, so when you see this list, this is because these are the primary sources of protein inside the diet. Okay, incomplete, complete, we kind of talked about that. You know, a lot of times in plant-based diets, you know, so some of my vegetarians and vegans I work with, I actually have them eat more protein. And the reason I have them eat more than the 1 gram is I want to make sure that they're getting all the amino acids that they can. And then last part of that is if maybe they don't, just because it's too much volume, then we could supplement with some essential amino acids. So that's kind of how I do with like plant-based, going off that question, okay? Some recommendations down here, I call this kind of the protein hierarchy. Number 1 goal is hit the protein need for the day, right? That's the number 1 goal. For optimal recovery, you know, dropping body fat, hit your protein need for the day. Then we can get into it, the timing of protein, right? 20 to 40 grams per setting is ideal to stimulate what's called MPS, which is muscle protein synthesis, right? And this is the cool thing about food, all right? I'll get a little nerdy. When you go work out, you stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which means the body wants to recover the muscle tissue and grow more of it, bigger, faster, stronger, right? When you eat protein, you have that same stimulation of muscle protein synthesis. So food truly is medicine in that aspect, okay? So in an ideal world, you know, okay, I'm eating 200 grams of protein a day. I'm going to eat 4 times a day. I would want 50 grams of protein every time I eat. That's how I'd break my, quote, consumption down. Then as we get a little bit more advanced, once again, not stressing about that for today, we could do a post-workout protein. We could add a little protein at night, like a cottage cheese and some fruit as a snack at night if you wanted to work on the recovery at night. But those are, once again, going to that next layer is more on timing. Questions on protein? 100%. Do we find a challenge?
I do. It's tough. I mean, and I'm eating hard-boiled eggs, tuna, everything
Yep.
like that, and it's still tough.
It's tough. Even for me, right? Like, hey, I've been teaching it for 20 years. I still track my food every now and then to keep me accountable, right? And what happens is when I go away from tracking, you know, I eat a little bit more peanut butter, a little bit less chicken breast, and all of a sudden you're looking at it and be like, oh, no wonder I've gained, you know, 10 pounds. So it is probably the hardest thing when I start working with new soldiers or new people is they eat less protein than what they think, okay? And remember, I say that 1 gram per, there's a give take there, right? You know, so once again, Chief, how much you weigh?
200.
Okay, but like if you were hitting like 160 protein, like that's still enough to, it's above that 0.8, right? But if you're only eating 100 grams of protein, that's where you're just not going to optimally recover. Okay, because it is tough to get in 1 gram per. Like I'll get you. You have to really concentrate on it. Yep. Other questions on protein? That's good? Good? How do you guys think you do on protein? And a lot of it is this. How convenient are those foods? No. If you went to the PX, you go to any gas station, you can't find these. What can you find a lot of? The processed foods. Yeah. Okay. So two takeaways, okay? Try to eat a primary protein source, one of these foods up here that you like, okay? And this is where I get into, like, I don't do meal plans. You know, everybody like, Jeremy, build me a meal plan. And I build, take all this time and I build out this meal plan, and they come back like, well, I don't like that. You told me to build you a meal plan, okay? Whatever protein sources you like, eat that. Eat it every time you eat. So every time you eat a meal or a snack, try to have a primary protein source, okay? Let that be like the base, okay? And then you can build on top of that, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind, you know, as you're building your meals. And the other thing with food prep, if you prep this, it's a lot easier, okay? And when I say food prep, don't think that you have to fix every single meal for the entire week, okay? We usually cook 3 times a week. We do Taco Tuesday. I know, original, right? Original. We do slider day, and we call it sliders because the kids, they won't eat hamburgers, but they'll eat sliders. Go figure, right? And then we do some chicken breast on the weekend. But what we do is we just fix enough that it lasts 2 or 3 days, right? So we cook those 3 days, but we just fix extra, and then we take those to build our meal prep. Okay, so don't think that you have to meal prep like on Sunday, because once again, this is what they put on social media, right? Meal prep Sunday, where they're fixing it for the entire week, and their Tupperware bowls are same colors and all that. Yeah, like you get tired of eating the same thing. And how good's the food you fixed on Sunday on Saturday, right? So just realize there's different ways to meal prep, but I would encourage you to batch cook or have protein sources on hand, because that's the toughest one. Buy some Greek yogurts. Like, they're already prepped. Greek yogurt, 12 grams of protein. All you got to do to eat it is what? Tear the lid off, okay? Cottage cheese, if you like it. I'm not a cottage cheese fan, but I always try to mention it because I know some people still, I just personally don't like it, and that's where I try not to bring my personal options into it. I always like to mention it, okay? All right, let's talk about carbohydrate. I do want to preface it with carbs. It's not that carbs are bad, okay? But if I could say what the typical soldier and the typical person I see in our society is, we undereat protein and we overeat carbohydrate, especially the simple processed ones. But I don't want you to think carbohydrate's bad, okay? Once again, there's no good or bad foods. Foods we should eat most of the time and foods we should eat every now and again, okay? Carbohydrate is one of our primary fuel sources. It is our primary fuel source for high intensity training. So once again, here we are in January. Everybody's cutting their carbs and starting to train what? High intensity. It's going to set them up for failure, okay? So you want to make sure that you still have a good carbohydrate load based on your training and type of training that you're doing, okay? When we look at carbohydrate, once again, it depends on body size, activity level, what your goals are. There can be a little bit of genetic predisposition here. For some people will do better on lower carb diets versus some people do better on higher carb diets. Like that goes into play. And then there's also the term of high and low. Okay? How tall are you, Chief?
74 inches.
Which, I'm sorry.
6'2".
6'2", okay. Yeah, don't really do math while I'm live. Can't do that. 6'2".
You told him in grams.
Yeah, Grace. Can you come up front for a second, sir? So, the term high and low is relative. So when you hear someone say low carb diet, what does that mean to you? Okay? So I have someone who's 6'2". I'm 5'9". All right, 5'8". Thanks for calling me out, okay? 6 foot tall to me, is it tall or short?
Tall.
It's tall. 6 foot to him is what? Well, 6 foot tall or short? It's relative, right? Thank you. Let's go. I mean, they laughed at it, but I think they laughed at my driver's license says 5'9". Okay. It is relative. So what is low carb to one person might not be low carb to another because it's relative. And we want to understand, because if I throw out low carb, some people will automatically think when you say low carb, that means keto. Some people think low carb is less than 300 grams a day, right? So the term low and high, they're relative terms. I want you guys to understand that, right? But there is some people that, yeah, we need to watch our carbohydrate. I am one of those. I feel better on higher fat diets than I do higher carb diets. Doesn't mean that I stay away from carbs. It's just that I feel better and I fuel better on that way. Okay? So a lot of times there is some genetic component that goes into it from which fuel source you'll need. Okay? We do want to focus on lower glycemic carbs. which is, they digest slower, so they don't increase our blood glucoses as fast. And that would be your fruits, your veggies, legumes, which is our beans, and our whole grains. So we do want to make sure that those are the ones that we're consuming. So going back to what I said earlier, we're eating a primary protein source. And then my next little thing to that is primary protein source, and then let's have a fruit or a veggie with it. Okay? That's kind of how I want you to build your food, either your snacks or your meals, from now on. So I got my primary protein source, I'm having a fruit or a veggie with it. Then after that, based on body size, activity level, all that, you could have some rice, some beans. You could have more if you want to. Or maybe I need to do double veggies because I need to lose a little bit of weight and I'm trying to keep calories what? Lower. But that base of primary protein source, a fruit or a veggie, that's what we need to do most of the time. Okay? That's the only thing that I recommend that I think everyone should do. After that, I'm not worried about if you eat 6 times versus 2 times versus all this, I call it bake the cake, right? So many professionals are arguing over what icing do we put on the cake. Do we do low carb? Do we do high carb? Do we fast? Do we not fast? That's the icing on the cake. Let's learn how to bake our cake first and get the basics down, and then we can stress about all that other stuff later because that's just the 5%. Okay? So, couple things to just note out here. Muscle glycogen, that's where we store carbohydrate. We can store about 300 to 400 grams of carbs. Liver glycogen, 75 to 100 grams of carbs. And then blood glucose technically is carbohydrate. So there's a little bit of carbohydrate in our bloodstream at all times, okay? And that's important to know too that like, hey, if you overeat carbohydrate one day because, it's a wedding anniversary, it's a date night, it doesn't ruin your diet. Doesn't mean that you failed. Your body can store that to use it later. Okay, so it's just more for knowledge at this point. Questions on carbohydrate? You ladies and gentlemen think you do okay on carbohydrate consumption? Do we do okay with the quality of carbs? Not all the time, right? All right. And then let's slide into fat. Big takeaway of fat is this. It is the other fuel source. People don't think it's fat as fuel, okay? But fat is a fuel source. We can break it down, put it in the Krebs cycle the same way we can carbohydrate. It is the primary fuel source that we use for low intensity exercise or at rest. So technically, if we went by energy systems right now, all of us are using more fat for fuel percentage-wise than we are what? Carbs, okay? But we're not burning that many calories because we're sitting or just standing, all right? Fat is important because it helps manufacture balanced hormones. It helps form our cell membrane. So going back to 8th grade biology, if you think about it, every membrane has a lipid layer around it. That lipid layer is a fat layer, okay? So fat is very important on the cellular part of inside of our body, okay? And then breaking it down, it helps transport vitamins A, D, and K. So if you're taking any vitamin D, vitamin K, or any of your fat-soluble vitamins, you always want to make sure you take it with a fat source to help with absorption. And note that there is a minimal amount of fat that the body needs. So if you did 0 fat, your health would be compromised over time. So eating 0 fat or very, 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 very low fat is not a healthy way to go. And some things I'll see sometimes like brittle nails, hair will start falling out, won't recover from workouts, extreme fatigue, lose muscle tissue. Those are some examples of side effects to extremely low fat diets, okay? The minimum amount is roughly 30 to 40 grams for females, 40 to 50 grams for males. So it's not that much in the grand scheme of things. We generally don't see an issue out of it unless people are just trying to be really extreme inside of a caloric deficit. Okay, but just know that fat is good, right? Because sometimes fat gets a stigma. Fat is bad, but once again, now in the 2000 whatever year we're at, like it's been around that both carbs are good and both fats are good. So both of them kind of carry a stigma with them. But I want you to understand the basics on it. Okay, in the bold down here, I think is important, right? It doesn't matter if you want to be low carb, high fat. It doesn't matter. But if you're going on a low carb diet, then the needs of fat in the diet is going to do what? Go up. If you do a high carb diet, then you don't need as much what? Fat. Because those two are our fuel sources. Okay? So those two are our fuel sources. You can also do a moderation. So technically, you could be what we consider moderate carbs and moderate fat. That's what I find works for most people long term. Right? If I wake up and I want to have oatmeal, okay, then I don't put peanut butter on my banana, okay, because I wanted the oatmeal. I wanted carbs, so cut back on the fats. So both of them are energy sources, and that's what I want you to take away from that. Do not be afraid to consume either one of them. It's really the combination of these two that is going to dictate whether I'm using my stored energy, which is my body fat. So if I overeat either carbs or fats, or I overeat a combination of them, I won't be in that caloric deficit. It's not really what the ratio of the carbs and fats are as much as the total energy provided from those two macros. Fat sources, nuts, seeds, avocados, olives, any of your oils, your butter. Processed foods, once again, is the enemy, because in processed foods you get a lot of your trans fats. And then something I want to note up here is, omega-3 fatty acids versus your omega-6 fatty acids. So there's a lot of talk about benefits of omega-3s inside of your diet. A lot of that comes from it helps decrease inflammation. And a lot of foods on the market, the processed carbohydrates, unfortunately are high in omega-6 fatty acids. So we as a society, once again, have this imbalance because of what we're eating, and that's where it leads to a lot of inflammation. So you'll see a lot of people, like, oh, my knees hurt, my elbows hurt, my wrists hurt, when they're not necessarily training. Those are not training injuries as much as the body is just inflamed from the diet. So it's important that we get away from a lot of those omega-6 sources, focus on a little bit of the more omega-3s, which is in our fish, in a lot of the nuts, the seeds, that type of stuff. So just one note I always like to make on the fat sources. Question time.
We got a few.
Got a few there? Okay.
All right, so first question. High-fat diets were told to me by my older primary physician that they are unhealthy.
So high-fat diets are unhealthy, just a general statement. Right. So we looked at, if you look at history, okay, of diets, once again, a low-fat diet was saying, okay, we need to go on a low-fat diet because increasing fat increases risk of cardiovascular disease, increases risk of what? Obesity, and therefore high-fat diets are what? Fat, okay? Inside of our body, if we consume too much carbohydrate, okay, the carbohydrate will go and fill up that muscle glycogen, that muscle storage first, and then it'll fill up the liver storage, and then when you eat more carbs and you don't have storage for it, where does carbohydrate go to? Converted to fat, okay? If I eat fat and I don't use it for hormonal production, I don't use it for energy, I don't have a storage unit for fat, so where does the additional fat go? To storage. So both overeating and overconsumption of carbs and fats is what leads to us gaining weight. Okay? No longer does the American Dietetic Association or the Heart, I'm drawing a blank on what the Heart Association is. American Heart Association, it's that, straightforward. American Heart Association, they no longer label cholesterol as bad because we've learned that cholesterol in food does not have a direct effect on our cholesterol levels. Okay? There is certain types of fat that will increase your risk of cardiovascular disease, increase your risk of developing high triglycerides, blockage of your arteries, and that is more going back to the processed foods, the trans fats. So our trans fats, the man-made fats, is what is going to cause issues. But if you're getting a high-fat diet from nuts and seeds, avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil, the healthy ones, then there's not that risk that's associated with it. The highest risk that comes with diets is when you overeat simple processed sugars combined with the trans fats. And where do we find that? Yeah, I mean, her answer, gas station, fast foods, right? Because that's what we're getting. We're getting the processed carbs, but we're also getting those unhealthy fats. So to that question, I wouldn't worry about a high-fat diet. Once again, if the total calories are controlled and those dietary choices of fat is coming from the healthy ones. Good question. What else we got?
We already covered this, but is it better to do more small, frequent meals or larger, less frequent meals?
So the question is it better to do small frequent meals, let's call it 6 times a day, versus eating 3 times a day? Okay? It is up to the individual. I'll bring back to a point that Chief made earlier. Jeremy, it is hard for me to get my protein in. Okay? If it's hard for someone to get their protein in and they're only eating 3 times a day, then it may be better to eat 5 times a day. Okay? I'm a fat kid at heart. I never understood this. I'll joke about my hard gainers. All right, people say, well, Jeremy, it's hard for me to eat 2,000 calories in a day. And I'm like, it's hard for me to not eat 2,000 calories for breakfast. Right? Okay? I did research for you guys. Okay? How many of you guys have ever ate goober? You know what goober is? Yeah, peanut butter jelly, right? Did you know there's 2,200 calories in an entire jar of goober? I did the research. I consumed it, and then I figured out how many calories were there, right? I don't know. I didn't go that far in my research, right? But it's sugar and fat, right? My point to that is there is not a right or wrong. Whatever works for you, and that's where it comes back to, once again, it's not a diet. It's lifestyle nutrition that works for you. If you feel more comfortable eating 3 times a day, that works for you. You feel good. You're dropping body fat. You're achieving the goals that you want to do. Eat 3 times a day. If 6 times works better for you, good. The only individual, and these are like, in my mind, avatars, right? When I say individuals, the person who comes to me and they say, Jeremy, my ultimate goal is to gain muscle tissue. My ultimate goal is to gain muscle tissue. They have no body fat they need to lose. Their ultimate goal is to gain muscle tissue. I will have them eat 6 times a day. Why? That goes back to that muscle protein synthesis that's stimulated by consuming protein. So if I can stimulate that muscle protein synthesis an extra couple times a day, then that helps them gain muscle tissue. Okay? For someone, Masco, myself, just you give examples, we don't really want to gain more muscle tissue, so it doesn't benefit us to eat 6 times a day. As long as we get our protein in 3 meals a day, we're going to maintain our muscle tissue. So the only person that would go to that is if their ultimate goal is to gain muscle tissue. Any more from that, sir? Okay.
So we got, what should we look for in protein shakes?
Okay, what should we look for in protein shakes? So one thing we want to understand about supplements is they are not regulated by the FDA. So anytime you're looking at a supplement, you should look and make sure that it is being tested from a third party. So when you, and they once again, now in life, when things are good or we do certain things from marketing, we're going to tell the world that. So when a supplement company has their product tested in a third party, they're going to label that on there. Some of them are like informed choice. I think that's a green arrow, 3 green arrows. It's like informed choice. And there's another one. There's a couple different third parties. So A, you want to make sure any supplement you get is being third party tested. And then what you look for in a protein supplement is A, do you like it? Does it taste good to where you're going to consume it as a protein source when you need it? Okay? Other than that, it comes down to, like a lot of people say, well, Jeremy, I don't do animal protein. Okay, then the best protein source for you is going to be a plant-based protein. Okay? If we're talking about post-workout, you would want a whey protein isolate because it digests faster. If we're just talking about a smoothie to keep us fuller, we would want a whey concentrate. So it's a loaded question, and what I would always ask for that, okay, what are your goals? Why are we going to consume the protein shake? Is it just quick, easy, convenient to get extra protein in? Do you like it? And what are the goals with it? So there's not one that is just best than others. Sometimes what you'll hear is whey protein is the best. That goes back to the question that you asked earlier. Whey protein has the best amino acid profile of any of the proteins. So that's where you hear sometimes that whey is king on shakes. But once again, that answer is going to be different for every single person based on what their goals are and based on what they want to achieve out of that.
Got 2 more.
Okay.
In regards to diet sodas with 0 calories, could you go into more details of why this is and should we limit them?
Yeah. So let me answer this in 2 parts. Be careful with labels to start with, for one thing, okay? Do any of you guys that are here, and I know it's hard online, do any of you guys use like the spray butter, I can't believe it's not butter, or the spray? Okay, how many servings are in that? Have you guys ever turned it over and looked at it?
112.
112, 250. So if you look at the amount of servings in those, right? There's these large amount of servings. Okay, and I'll just use the one we use. We use an olive oil spray, okay? And turn over in the back, there's 250 servings in this bottle of spray olive oil. A serving is a quarter of a second. So when you guys go to fix your eggs, do you like, toot? Or do you go? So that's probably like 12 servings, okay? Yeah. So when it comes to labeling, if it is less than 1 gram of fat, then companies are allowed to, if it's less than 1 gram of fat per serving, they are allowed to label that as 0 what? Fat. But if I'm using 12 servings, I'm probably getting an additional 7, 8 grams of fat inside of what? That spray. Same thing comes down to sugar substitutes a lot. This is if you do, you mentioned I think it earlier, the low-calorie Gatorade. If you ever looked at your low-calorie Gatorade, if you see in the first serving, there's 0 calories. But if you do the entire bottle, it says there's 10 calories. Okay? That's because of rules and regulations. Because if a serving size has less than 1 gram of something, they're allowed to label it as what? 0. But when you drink the entire bottle, that's where the calories come from, because now that serving size is what? Larger. Okay? Comes to diet sodas. You can find research that says sugar substitutes have no effect on blood glucose levels, no effect on hunger, nothing. You can also find research that says sugar substitutes will make you hungry, will still increase your blood glucose levels, etc. Okay? I am a big, in practice, input versus output. If you are consuming a diet soda, okay, let's just call it Coke Zero, you're consuming a Coke Zero every single day, your diet's under control, your exercise is good, you're sleeping good, you're practicing good resiliency, everything's getting better, keep that diet soda in your plan. You're getting better, okay? If you're doing all that and you're drinking 6 diet sodas a day, then I might say, hey, we might want to cut back on the amount of diet soda that we are consuming. So it is not a hard, don't do that. I would rather someone use a diet soda if they're going to have it regular than a regular soda, just because of the amount of sugar that's in it. But once again, the research is so, it's not specific or one way or the other. Was there one more or was that? I thought there was one more.
This is probably just good for everybody.
Okay.
Is there a way to reach out to you
Yes.
to go over personal plans?
Yes.
They put in parentheses, not meal plan, because you are.
100% yes. Yeah, so with these, we'll make sure that our entire team will have their contact information out there. So I don't know if that's on social media. Hey, reach out to me on social media. I'm active on Facebook and Instagram. What's the kids one they use? TikTok. Not on that one, okay? On the old man Facebook and on Instagram. So they can message there. If it is, someone, a soldier within the ranks, then they can reach out via email or to our team. So yes, I'm more than happy to help soldiers, families, or anybody for that matter when it comes to answering questions. This side of the room, any questions you guys have? Eye-opening? Learn some stuff? What's one takeaway? Remember, nothing wrong with peanut butter, okay? Once again, nothing wrong with it, but it's like, I joke about it. I can have peanut butter when I'm tracking my food because I weigh and measure things. I have to be very careful when I'm in the phases of not weighing and measuring, because then it's just, it's a scoop and you're like, yeah, that's 2 tablespoons, right? And it's really 4 tablespoons. So it's not that peanut butter is bad. Like once again, I use that as a joke, but it could be like, okay, maybe you do need to eyeball it. Okay, like you need to actually measure what 2 tablespoons look like, just so you can then see and be like, okay, I know the appropriate amount now, to consume it because I'm eating 1,000 calories in peanut butter. So, question or takeaway? Okay, perfect.
One question, you're talking about food diaries and weighing food. How do you weigh pasta? Do you weigh it dry or wet?
So I recommend, this is just me, okay? You can do it either way. Because if you notice pasta on the back of it, most pastas will have both dried and wet, right? So whichever way you weigh it, you would use that information. It's the same way with meat, right? People like, Jeremy, do you measure your meat cooked or raw? Doesn't matter, as long as when you log it into the database that you're using, that you use the appropriate way. Like I wouldn't measure my chicken breast cooked and then use the raw selection inside of the database. Does that make sense? So I always do it cooked. Everything's cooked for me because that's the way I eat it. That's just how I measure. It's easier. Okay? And when I say, like, I don't weigh, like what we do is we have our little scale, and I put it like on my plate, and then I just redo the scale. Right? And then I put, you know, the rice on there or whatever on there. So it's not like I weigh it all. It doesn't take that long once you get it. Just put your plate on the scale, and then you push the button to zero it. Right? Then you put your chicken breast on there. All right, there's 8 ounces chicken breast. You zero it. I scoop out my rice. Okay, cool. There's X amount of grams of rice. Right? It's just you can do it really quick. But, and the other thing with weighing and measuring, I am not the, and our team has taken this approach too, we are not going to say that you need to weigh and measure and track your food 365 days a year for the rest of your life. We're not saying that, okay? Everybody's at different levels. Some people it is, I want you to stop doing fast food 5 days a week. Let's only do it 2 days a week. That's a behavior change. That can get us moving in the right direction, okay? But I feel like all of us will need to get to a point, it's just like our man, I'm going to age myself. It is just like keeping balancing your checkbook out. I know, I got it, Junior. It's like balancing your checkbook. If you've never learned to track it, then you don't know what works for you, okay? So I do want people to go through a phase that they track everything because we're creatures of habit. We eat the same foods over and over. Good foods or bad foods. We like the same stuff. That's cool. We just need to learn the amount of it that we need to eat. So it was a long answer to a simple question.
That's okay, I have another question.
You're more than welcome. Keep asking.
So like, Orange Theory, some of their, advertising is they work you out past, so you're over a certain heart rate for a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're done working out, you're still technically, they say, burning fat for the next 12 to 24 hours. Can you explain that?
Yes. EPOC. Exercise post oxygen consumption. Fancy term, right? Okay. That's the beautiful thing about exercise, right? And especially resistance exercise. So high intensity and resistant exercise, both are great, right? Because of the after effects that come with it, okay? So when you train really hard, what it is, yeah, your heart rate stays elevated after the fact, so you're breathing heavier, and that means your body's burning more what? Calories, okay? That's the simplest way to look at it, right? Same thing with resistance training. You can run for an hour and burn more calories in that hour from running than you will your resistance training. But then when I resistance train, I break down my, like we did bench press, so I broke down my triceps and my chest, and we did pull-ups, my lats today. Well, now my body has to work, AKA burn energy, which is what? Calories, to recover my muscles. So there is a lot of stuff that goes into post-exercise, not just the exercise itself. That's the reason, like I'm big on, you know, so I took my watch off so I didn't get alerts and can focus on talking and doing the brief. But like I wear a Whoop that does sleep and does heart rate and does all that. I have a Garmin that does the same thing. I used to have the Oura Ring, like, because I want all that data, but it's just what? Data, okay? So a lot of people, the mistake they make inside of weight loss is, well, Jeremy, my Fitbit said I burned 1,000 calories. So they eat the 1,000 calories what? Back. Well, Fitbit and a lot of these wearables, if you look at the research that was done on them, most of them overestimate by 20, 30%. So anything like that is like input versus output. Hey, I do Orange Theory 3 days a week, right? Versus run 3 days a week. I see better results on the same diet, the same sleep, the same stress relief in doing Orange Theory than I do running. Cool, keep doing the Orange Theory. That works better for you. Did that answer it plus give it a little bit more insight? Okay. Same thing with resistance training. So in resistance training, like when you do heavy, and heavy is relative, heavy squats and deadlifts, you have an increase in testosterone and growth hormone, which promotes also recovery and growth. Okay, when I say increase, I'm not talking about over physiological, whatever your body can produce, but that is benefits that come out of resistance training. So let me slide to the negative. Do Orange Theory every single day might not be the best, because the higher the intensity the exercise, the more time it takes the body to what? Recover. When you go in and train at a high output, high exercise, you're using primary carbohydrate for fuel. What could that do to your appetite? Could drive it up, right? So you see how there can be good and bad out of it. But as far as that science behind it is what's called EPOC, which is post-exercise oxygen consumption, which is burning calories. Good one. Got to nerd out on that.
What are your thoughts and opinions on intermittent fasting?
Okay. You guys missed it.
We did.
I know. That's okay. I forgot about that question. So the question is, what about fasting? A, go for it. You guys fast every day. Last consumption of calories at night until breakfast, break the fast, is a fasting what? Period. Okay? There's a lot of good research on fasting, longer periods of fasting. 24, 36, 48 hours for improved immune function, improved gut health, all that. Do not use fasting thinking it's going to be a faster way to lose body fat. That's my opinion. Do not use fasting, faster way to lose body fat. If fasting a period of time during the day allows you to keep your calories in check, because like for me, I like to eat bigger meals, so I'm not a big breakfast person. Like I generally wait till I train before I eat anything. And most of the time it's train, do a post-workout shake, and then I don't eat until lunch. Okay, that works for me. So if it helps you keep your total calories in check, cool, fast. But it's not quicker, right? Because when it comes down to fat loss, it'll always come down to hitting your protein goal for the day and maintaining your calories. So this is another takeaway. This is my elevator spill. If you hit your calorie goal for the day, remember that's different for every person because some people need to lose weight, some people need to gain weight. If I'm trying to lose weight, okay, going back to my example, let's just use 2,200 calories. As long as I hit 200 grams of protein and I eat 2,200 calories, I will lose body fat. I will maintain muscle because I'm eating my protein, and I'll lose body fat because I'm in a calorie what? Deficit. This is why protein is so important. If I eat 2,200 calories a day and I eat 50 grams of protein, I will still lose weight, but some of that weight will be muscle tissue and some of that weight will be body fat. And this is what happens to most people. This is what I've seen in my first 6 years of the military too. Oh, body fat test is coming up. I need to do what? Drop my calories. They drop the calories, they lose weight. They lost 20 pounds. They still fail the tape test.
Is there any benefit to working out during your fasting period as opposed to?
You can. That research comes from this. If you're in a fasted state, the body wants to use body fat for fuel, but it's all percentage based, okay? So if you do the same workout, same intensity, let's just use Orange Theory because that was used as an example. If you go to Orange Theory, you run the same speed on the treadmill, you do the same amount of reps with the dumbbell, you do the same speed or the same meters on the rower, you do the exact same workout in a fasted state versus an unfasted state, the total calories for both of those workouts are the same. Is everybody tracking that? But if you do it in a fasted state, there's more fat calories than carbohydrate calories. Like that's the only difference. And that just goes into that total calorie consumption for the day. Because if I'm not in a fasted state, I'm going to use some of the fuel that I ate beforehand. But if I eat the same amount of total calories for the day, it all works out in the wash. That's because I saw another article again that came out on that the other day about, well, you burn 70% more fat calories in a fasted state. You do, but it's the same amount of calories. So as long as you're controlling exercise and you're controlling nutrition, that's what matters. Okay? Because if you did that same workout in the afternoon, you're burning the same amount of calories total, and it comes down to that calorie balance day in and day out. So my opinion of that to athletes is this. Do you like to eat before you work out? Just for you personal. Cool. Don't eat. Go work out fasted. More than welcome to. If that's the way you like to. That's the way I do it. Coffee or pre-workout, get a little caffeine so I wake up and go work out. That's because remember, muscle glycogen we're talking about stored, we have fuel that we can use for the workout.
Any faster ways to get there?
Goes to I think it was here. Listen, we sell This Is Hard. Okay? Our H2F program, we sell This Is Hard. You have to work on all the domains. You have to work on all the disciplines. It is hard, okay? And I'll say this, eating rice and beef and broccoli is not hard. Saying no to the pizza and the bourbon is hard, right? Getting up early is not hard. Going to bed early is what's hard. You see what I'm saying? So there has to be that point of, and do we have any more questions on there? Okay. One of the best things is going a little bit of the way we think, okay? The thing I would encourage you, because it brings value. We do things in life because it brings value to us, okay? And the biggest thing that I would say is, and this is just like when people try to quit smoking, okay? When someone's trying to quit smoking, the individuals that says, no, I don't want that smoke, I'm trying to quit, the likelihood of them succeeding is not very high because they still identify as a what? Sorry, I don't want that cigarette because I am no longer a smoker. They're both in the same stage of trying to quit, but it's the identity. When we identify that, hey, we want to be healthier, right, then we find value in all the stuff. Doesn't mean that we can't have bourbon every now and again. Doesn't mean we can't have pizza every now and again, right? But that'll bring more value, and that will make it easier. But yeah, I wish there was a faster way, right? But the fastest way, hit your protein, hit your calories where you're in a calorie deficit, hit that most of the time, walk for an hour a day, do some resistance training, do a little bit of high intensity, boom. That's the easy way. That's the easy way.
So I have one comment and one question. So the comment, I think, is more towards the environment.
Yep.
Your environment means a lot.
Yep.
It really does. And whether it's smoking or drinking or losing weight. But two, my question is, as far as losing weight, so the intensity, you know, the old story about you're burning muscle if it's more faster type thing. Like if you look at the treadmill and you say, okay, we do it at this speed, then it's cardio and you're burning fat.
Mm-hmm.
They got this fat burning thing. But if you got these big mountains that you got to climb, then you're burning muscle. Is that true?
No. So it's more. So let me back all the way up so it's on. The comment was, and the Chief's 100% correct to this, like change your environment, okay? Like I am blessed with this team because the team brings out the best in us. We motivate each other in a fun way, right? In the sense that we call each other out when it needs to be, if we need to improve. But also we look at it and be like, okay, my environment, this person's good at that. I need to get better at that, right? But there is a reason that if we looked at it and said, okay, the people that are around me, you know, all in the exercise domain have high ACFT scores. Everyone eats good. Everyone tries to sleep good. I feel like that's the big one that we need to work on, everybody. The sleep. You're resilient. We practice, you know, whether it is spiritual, we practice the mental resilience, right? Because of the environment. So 100% agree with that. And then the question is, we don't burn muscle tissue. There's only 2 times you burn muscle tissue. Extreme caloric diets and long endurance exercise. So I'm talking about marathon plus 4 or 5 hours. So I'm talking about ultra runs, okay? So when someone gets out there and they run 100 miles, they're breaking down muscle tissue just because it's so long, okay? What you're seeing on the treadmills and heart rate zones is the fat and the carbs, okay? If I sprint from here to the wall 10 seconds, I'm actually using what's called phosphocreatine for energy system because that's my first 10 seconds of my energy system. After 10 seconds and I'm still sprinting, I'm using pure carbohydrate for fuel. That can only last about 1.5 minutes. So you can really only hold a full out sprint about 1.5 minutes and then you have to back off a little bit. All right, so then from 1.5 minutes, let's just say we're running the 2 mile, well then you're using 90% carbs, maybe 10% fat. All right, now we're running 10K, 80% carbs, 20% fat. We're running an ultra marathon, 20% carbs, 80% fat, because the heart rate is lower over the ultra marathon. People say, well, Jeremy, they still got to fuel with carbohydrate. Yes, because the ultra marathon takes 12 hours. So you're still because of the time frame. So that's a carbohydrate and a fat for fuel. Okay, that's probably we could do one of these educations on that, all the 5 heart rate zones. There is a little formula that you can remember, and it's 180 minus your age. So that's kind of like we look at bell-shaped curves. We love our bell-shaped curves. You know, so in a bell-shaped curve at the top of it, that's 180 minus your age. So for me at 42, roughly at 138 heartbeat, if I stay below 138 heartbeat, I know I'm using primary fat for fuel. When I go over that, I start using more carbohydrate for fuel. So that's just a little bit of a thing. And there's no right or wrong, you know.
And that was big, I remember that back in the day when people were wearing the
Yeah.
heart rate monitors and everything like that.
Still big in endurance training because we'll train in zones, you know, and you know, we'll spend 80% of the training in more of zone 2, you know, because you're building cardiovascular, and then you'll do more 20% in those higher, you know. But in fat loss, you know, it's both, okay? And this is what I always tell individuals I work with. You want a resistance training, okay? You need to have resistance training in your program. If we're talking about optimal fat loss, we need to resistance train. We also need to do cardio. Some of that cardio needs to be a couple of high-intensity sessions like Orange Theory or sprints on the treadmill. We don't want to do it every day because it does take time for the body to recover, and it can increase appetite. Because remember, if you're a fat loss person of mine, I've got you in a reduced calorie diet. So I want to be careful about how much high intensity I do because that could drive hunger. So we're doing, you know, 3 to 4 sessions of cardio. A couple of those are high intensity. We're training with resistance training 4 or 5 days a week, and we're walking every day. That is, when you say what's the easy or what's the magic, it's that, okay? And for those that are on Instagram, all that, like you can go, that's primarily what my Instagram page is. It is hundreds of people that I've worked with that you look at them, if the before picture wasn't on there, you would never know they were 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 pounds overweight. That is the formula. Does it look a little bit different for everybody? Yeah, because we have different likes. I want to find what you are comfortable doing because, once again, it's about what is sustainable, right? What is sustainable long term? We're good? 3 minutes over. So for those that are on the IG or on the live, we will be doing this again in 2 weeks, different topic. We'll continue to put it out. For the recording, we maybe look at doing recording that you can access it at any time. For those that came out today, thank you for coming out today.